Mr. Crenshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to pick up a little bit on what the chairman just talked about in terms of readiness. When I walked in, Mr. Skloski was talking about the industrial base. And want to ask a couple, we've had this ongoing conversation about tanks. And I actually just came for a meeting with Condoleezza Rice, and we were talking about Ukraine, talking about Russia, talking about Georgia, talking about NATO. And one of the things that she commented on, maybe we were a little premature in thinking everything is going in the right direction. And when you talk about tanks, I know there was a time 3-5 years ago, she said we don't need any more tanks for now, but we might need them 5 years later. And so we had a discussion about what happened if you shut down a production facility and then had to start it back up. And there was a back and forth about how much that might cost, somewhere $500 million to $1 billion, $500 billion to $1 billion. And the last several years, this subcommittee, we have to take like a long view of the world. I know sometimes your decisions can be driven on a short-term basis, but we provided somewhat of a safety net to make sure that the only tank production and modernization facility we have stayed open, along with some foreign military sales. And each year, you've chosen not to put any money in your request but we kind of provided that safety net. And so once again, here we are. We look at the request, and I think your view is that hopefully foreign military sales will keep the line sustainable. And as the world seems to get a little more dangerous, tanks probably become more important than they might have been 5 years ago in terms of modernization. And I guess the question is, if we didn't provide a safety net and the foreign military sales weren't what we all hoped they would be, what would happen to that only tank production facility we have in the country? And if it were to shut down, how much would it cost the Army, the military, to start it back up either next year or the year after that? And that's not in the budget. So talk about that and how you view the whole readiness issue, the industrial base issue, because I think we all agree how important it is, but it seems like that is an overall cost of doing business.
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Crenshaw, I'll start and then let the Chief take over. As I mentioned earlier, we spend a whole lot of time trying to analyze what we are able to do to sustain both the organic as well as the external industrial base. In the case of our combat fleet, we have in fact done some things to try to stretch out procurement times to sustain a minimum amount of work necessary to retain the skilled workers, which is our focus. We can't possibly maintain an entire workload as it was at the height of production, but we want to keep those skilled workers. We've made some accelerated acquisition, I mentioned earlier, in FLIR, our forward-looking infrared radars, some engine transmissions for the Bradley and other units to try to ensure that those skilled workforces stay available. And we have accelerated, with respect to the Abrams, we've accelerated our plan for the engineering upgrades, originally planned in 19. We've accelerated that to 17. We had, and you mentioned, a shutdown to warm status analysis that showed us that doing that kind of action and then a restart was far more cost efficient than sustaining and buying product that we don't need. We will have met the full Army acquisition requirement for Abrams tanks by next year, 15. It will be what it already is one of the most modern articles in the United States Army's inventory. The average Abrams tank is 4 to 5 years old right now. So do we wish we had money to continue to buy and build up a reserve? I suppose that would be nice, but in the current budget realities, we just don't have that capacity.
If I could just add, we have the most modernized and new tank fleet that we've ever had since I've been in the Army. today. And that's because of the investments that you've allowed us to make. And so I feel comfortable with where we are with our tank fleet. We have not ignored it. We have capacity, we have capability, so we have that capability. The issue is, as the Secretary said, is how do we sustain an industrial base for the long term? And I think we've tried to come up with the best strategy possible to do that. And so I feel comfortable with where we are with that. I feel comfortable with where we are with our tank fleet. Again, I believe we have the best tank in the world, and I believe we have the most, and it's been modernized to the extent that we have the fleet age of our tanks are the slowest they've ever been. And so I feel comfortable with where we are with that. We certainly are concerned with sustaining an industrial base that can continue to support us in the long term.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crenshaw.